So I did something that till this very day I absolutely regret. So I spent the last few weeks sharing with you the journey of how God chose my spouse. But what I haven't shared with you are the many counterfeits that I encountered along the way. In all my years of working with women, one of the major things that I hear when relationships sort of like go down the drain is that there were no red flags or that they didn't see the red flags. But as Tiffany once said, there were red flags, but you thought that it was a carnival. So you decided to attach yourself to clowns that you had no business being with in the first place. The thing with red flags is that they are always present, but they aren't always obvious. And that's because most people don't know how to critically evaluate situations in order to be able to see red flags for what they truly are. Why this is so important is because how you respond to red flags greatly impacts what you will ultimately experience in your relationship or what you will ultimately experience in marriage. So what I like to say is the red flags that you ignore today ultimately become the reason why the relationship or the marriage ends, or it becomes the prayer points that you labor over in marriage. One of the biggest strategies that the enemy uses when it comes to relationships or when it comes to marriage is what I like to call counterfeiting. And this is when he presents an alternative to what God has said or to what God has promised. And we see this in the life of Abraham when Sarah presented Hagar as the alternative, as the counterfeit. And Ishmael ended up being the counterfeit promised child. And we see this also when Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness, when Satan offered him an alternative to what his purpose was. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the guys that came my way on this journey and the red flags that highlighted to me that they were counterfeit and not the one. So remember I told you in part 1 that there was a second guy on the list of potentials. In that video, I think I called him something like Mr. X, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to call him Mr. Eat My Cake and Have It Too. If you remember, I moved back to Nigeria in 2010. I started NYC in 2010 and I met him during NYC in the place that I was working. He seemed like a cool Christian guy. So we started to develop a friendship. So we used to talk a lot about any and everything. Conversation was easy, no awkward conversations. It was cool because we were sort of like getting to know each other. We were building a friendship. And then it got to the point where like I started developing feelings for him and I knew that he liked me too, but he wasn't sort of like seeing anything. So I did something that till this very day I absolutely regret. I would never advise anyone to do this, and I hope that you can learn from the mistake that I made. Like I said, I liked him, he liked me too, but he wasn't saying anything and I was getting a bit impatient. So I took matters into my own hands and I manipulated the situation to get him to sort of like share his feelings. So I remember this day, it was a Saturday and he was working. The office was maybe like a 10-minute drive away from where I lived. So we were this was like the time of BlackBerry Messenger. So we're chatting on BBM and he had talked about how hungry he was. He had been at the office for longer than he planned, so he didn't sort of like make arrangements to get anything to eat. He could go somewhere to get something, but he was just really trying to finish up with work so that he could just leave. So I'm like, okay, cool. I live 10 minutes away. I'll bring something for you to eat. At the back of my mind, I wanted to see him because, like I said, I liked him. So I was like, this is an opportunity to get to see him and all of that. So I took some food from the house and then I went down to the office to see him and we were just chatting. So I came up with a scenario. I'm like, I want to ask you something. If you found yourself in this sort of situation, what would you do? So I must have said something along the lines of, you like somebody, she likes you too, but before you get around to actually asking her out, she enters into a relationship with somebody else. What would you do? So at the back of my mind, I'm like, that ought to do the trick. that ought to get him to say something. And if he doesn't say anything, maybe he doesn't like me, or he doesn't like me as much as I thought or I think he does. So I saw, like, when I asked the question, his mood sort of like changed a little bit. Come Monday, he's like, oh, that he wants to talk to me about something. At the back of my mind, I'm like, whoa, it's like this thing worked even quicker, or rather even sooner than I thought that it would. So we had a conversation. In the conversation, he told me that he had feelings for me, that he was serious. He's at the point in his life where he's not like trying to play about and stuff like that. So I'm now like, okay, cool. However, the decision is not my own to make. I need to pray about it, and I would like you to pray about it as well. Like, I need to make sure that I have a conviction from God and you have a conviction from God as well. Like, that's the only way I'm going to enter into a relationship with you. Tell me, guys, tell me why I did not pray about it before I manipulated this young guy into sharing his feelings with me. Anyways, so I prayed about it, and I'm sure you can guess that it was a huge, fat no that God gave me. And I don't even know, I can't remember the exact details. I can't remember if I even made it through the prayer and I was overcome with such an intense lack of peace that it was borderline fear. Like, every time I thought about him, like, my spirit was so troubled. Like, it was borderline fear. It was almost anxiety. I was like, okay, God, I hear you loud and clear. This must be a no. And you remember in like part 1, when I was talking about the conviction that I got for Mr. Man and the overwhelming peace that I just could not explain. This was sort of like on the opposite spectrum of that. So I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? I shouldn't have manipulated this guy into sharing his feelings with me, because now I'm going to have to go back to tell him that I don't believe that God is giving me a go ahead, so I'm not going to be able to enter into a relationship with you. I would just have gingerly left the guy to be on his own and not sort of like urged him to say anything. And it's just like, sometimes we try to help God, or we try to help the situation along because we get impatient, or we feel like things are moving slower than we want, and it often ends in disaster. So the question here is, if I believed that God was in control and I felt like there was a possibility that he was the one, did I not believe that God himself would orchestrate everything that needed to be orchestrated in order for it to come to its expected end, as opposed to pulling a Sarah by taking things into my own hands to try to move the situation along? And unfortunately, oftentimes our actions give the enemy ammunition to either guilt trip us or trap us into making certain decisions that are more in line with his path than God's path. And I believe that the enemy's plan for this situation was sort of like to guilt trip me into accepting to enter into a relationship with this guy. I mean, I've gotten over it, but even when I share this story, there are thoughts of guilt that still want to sort of like resurface and all of that. So back then, this was a few years ago, back then, like, I was really overwhelmed with guilt that, oh my God, like, I really should not have done this and stuff. And the enemy just kept trying to convince me that maybe the best way to rectify the situation is basically just to date the guy. But yeah, of course, like, I wasn't going to do that. So I'm sharing this because I sort of like wanted to be food for thought for you as well. In what ways have you been tempted to sort of like help God, or tempted to take situations into your own hands? I've heard stories of like situations where maybe both parents or one parent of the couple are not on board with the relationship, and then they decide that the best way to force the hands of their parents is like to get pregnant or something. Whatever it is, or whatever situation you find yourself in, God doesn't need your help. What he requires from us is obedience. Anyways, obviously at that point in time, God said no, so there really wasn't any need or any reason to carry on the trajectory that we had been going, the frequency with which we had been speaking and stuff like that, because I mean, at the end of the day, I can't date you, sort of thing. So let's not keep building a friendship or a relationship or going down this path that was supposed to lead there when we know that that's not going to be the destination. So communication sort of like trickled off. I finished NYC and all of that. I started dating Mr. Man anyways. Maybe like 2 years later, I then have a dream about him, which was pretty weird because, like I said, we lost touch, we lost communication. This was not somebody that I was talking to, I was in communication with or anything. So I felt like it was pretty strange that I was having a dream about him. Anyways, in the dream, I was sort of like in a room or in a house, and maybe we had just had a conversation, or he had just expressed his feelings to me that, he was interested in me, he loved me or whatever. And in the next scene of the dream, I then see him outside having a conversation with some other woman, sort of like telling her the exact same thing. So the basic idea of the dream is that he's sort of like trying to two-time or something like that. So I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is like a really weird dream. I haven't spoken to this guy in ages. Why am I dreaming about him? And why am I having this sort of a dream about him? Anyways, out of the blue, he messages me just to sort of like check up on me and stuff like that. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 conversations, BBM chats, nothing serious. It seemed like he was just trying to rekindle the connection or the friendship or the, like when you're trying to get on someone's radar sort of thing. And then not long after that, someone then sends me a message from his phone. I say someone because by the time I tell you the context, you realize that he wasn't the one. At first, I thought that he was the one, but when I read the message, I'm like, okay, this is not him. So basically, the message was from who I assumed after reading the message was a woman, telling me that either they had been in a relationship or an on and on relationship, or he's trying to ask her out or whatever. There was something going on there, but that people were telling her that I'm also in the picture and that he's in love with me, and that she's basically only just telling me all this so that I know the sort of person he is. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Ogali, see your life. See your life, Ogali, see your life. As in, I felt like I was in a movie. I'm like, does this happen in real life? I never thought that I would ever find myself in a situation where I'm fighting over a man. And the thing is that I wasn't even fighting over him. I haven't spoken to him in like 2 years until recently, where he's sort of like trying to reconnect. And there is this person sending me a message. I'm like, okay, I don't really know what to make of this situation, but okay. So I didn't say anything that day. I think the next day, when I was sure that he would have his phone back, I then sent him a message that I think you need to check your phone because somebody sent me a message using your phone yesterday. I remember that later on, I then asked that, oh, did you ever find out who sent the messages? And the thing with the office where we used to work is that there were CCTV cameras everywhere. So I suspect that he had left his phone on his desk because she worked there as well, and she had gone to his desk to pick up his phone. So he would have been able to check the cameras to see who it was. So he knew who it was. Now, the really freaky, scary thing that happened was, at that time, I had sort of like a side business as a pastry chef. So I used to make cakes and stuff like that. And he had told me that a friend of his wanted to order a cake. So he gave her like my details and all of that. So I made the cake and I delivered it. So when I asked him who was the one that sent the messages, he then told me that it was the lady that had ordered the cake from me. And it was super scary. And the reason why I say that is because at this point he knew who had sent the messages, but he still exposed me to her because I delivered the cake myself really early in the morning on my way to work. So I'm like, God forbid anything could have happened. This lady could have felt like I was trying to steal her guy and could have stabbed me or could have hired some guys to do something. And I think I told him this. I was like, oh my God, that maybe it's me just being paranoid, but you put me in a potentially dangerous situation sort of thing. And that's basically just in addition to the fact that I'm not even sure what you're trying to do. So basically at that point in time, he had tried to start telling me that he still had feelings for me and all of that. So I'm like, this whole situation is messed up. Like, this is somebody that's either you're dating or you have unfinished business with, or I don't know what's going on with you guys. She's busy sending me messages to keep off you sort of thing. And then you're exposing me to her. I'm just done with this situation. But what I sort of like want to highlight here is, at the end of the day, I can list out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of red flags for you to look out for in a relationship to let you know that, okay, there's potentially something fishy going on here. But the greatest tip that I can give you is to learn to hear God for yourself. Anybody could have had that dream and discarded it. But in that dream, God was trying to communicate something to me about this person. Like, I had the dream even before he popped up, even before this whole situation happened. So as shocking as the situation was, it wasn't a surprise because God had already spoken to me about it before it happened. And then another thing is, bear in mind that it is not the hearer of the word that is blessed, but the doer. So God can reveal a million things to you, but the question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to take it as gist and like, okay, and just keep doing what you're doing? Are you going to ignore it? So these are the things that you need to take into consideration, that when you do see these red flags, what are you going to do about it? Anyways, fast forward to 2022, December 2022 to be precise. My godfather had invited my brother and I to a singles event. I didn't really want to go, but I was at the stage of my life where everybody was pressuring me for marriage. So I pretty much attended for the free food and just to fulfill all righteousness, but more for the free food than anything else. I didn't have much hope for it. I didn't think I was going to meet anybody, but surprise, surprise, I did meet someone. For the purpose of this video, we will call him Mr. Time Waster. Another nice Christian guy, cute, my type of guy. He was very active at church. He was like a youth leader. He was a member of the choir. I liked guys that can sing. We exchanged numbers. We started to talk, as in we literally talked every day, multiple times a day sort of thing. But like right off the bat, I made it clear that the decision for a relationship is not my own. I'm not going to enter into a relationship with anybody unless I believe that God has given me the conviction and God has given him the conviction as well. He wasn't necessarily on the same page. He's like, oh, that he's more a case of let me start dating you to see like what happens and all of that. But don't ask me why I kept on talking to him, as you do when you like somebody. Anyways, we kept on talking, but the thing is, he kept trying to get me to admit that I had feelings for him. It was a really weird sort of like situation. At the back of my mind, I'm like, yes, I like you, and I know you suspect that I like you too, but why are we having that line of conversation? And I should highlight that right from the beginning, I felt like Holy Spirit was asking me to pray about this relationship, but I kept resisting because I'm like, what exactly am I going to pray about? This guy hasn't told me anything. He hasn't told me how he feels. He hasn't told me about any form of intention. And this guy was really sweet, like extremely sweet. So there was this time that I went to visit him. And I think in one of our conversations, I had mentioned something small that I liked. And by the time I got to his house, he had gotten it. It was like maybe Chicken Republic chicken or something. And he got like a whole bucket of the chicken. And I was like, wow, like how thoughtful. I had just mentioned this thing in passing and you got it. The visit went well and it was time for me to leave. He's like, oh, that he's going to hop in the car with me and then see me off to the junction. That he will let me know where I should drop him off. I'm like, okay, cool. So junction after junction after junction, I'm like, guy, where am I dropping you off? He's like, no problem, I should keep driving. You won't believe that this guy followed me all the way to my house. He's like, oh, that he just wanted to make sure, well, not all the way to my house, but around the area. He asked me to drop him off at the bus stop, that he would take the bus back home. And that he only just followed me to make sure that I got back safely. And at the time, I thought that was sort of like a really sweet thing to do. So that was the sort of person that he was. He was extremely thoughtful and all of that. But I just still had this uneasiness because Holy Spirit kept telling me to pray. So I remember it was a Wednesday night and Holy Spirit was like, girl, you better pray. I had already said goodnight to him. I was already in bed getting ready to sleep. Holy Spirit was like, you need to pray. So I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to pray. Don't really know what I'm going to pray about, but hey, I will pray. And I remember it was a really short prayer, nothing complicated, something along the lines of, okay, God, you see what's going on. Shine your light on this situation. Let everything that is hidden come out to the light, or something along those lines. So I woke up the next morning, sort of like expecting to receive a good morning text from him. There was nothing, which I thought was a bit strange because he's usually the, oh, good morning, how did you sleep sort of thing. But I thought, okay, fine, maybe he slept late, he's still sleeping. It wasn't until like maybe later on in the morning, like around 10, 11, or maybe even around noon, that I heard from him. And he seemed, I don't know, he seemed a bit off. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? And we proceed to have a conversation. And in this conversation, he pretty much tells me how there's no future for us because I'm older than him. I was like, wow. And it was one of those conversations where I'm sure he was surprised at the things that he was saying, because I feel like Holy Spirit literally just took over that conversation and caused him to say things that he had been thinking, things that he had held inside, but for whatever reason hadn't said. At the back of my mind, I'm like, sort of like, what have we been doing? Like right from the beginning, because like I'm a year older than you. I was like, wow. And he's like, oh, that he's just sorry that he just saw a light in me. And he just wanted to, I can't remember the phrase he used. He wanted to enjoy the light or partake of the light or something. So in my mind, I'm like, am I a flashlight? Am I a flashlight? What does this even mean? At this point, God has started to teach me a lot about boundaries. So at the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, thank you so much for telling me this. But like whatever this was can't continue, sort of thing, because I feel like initially, before he said anything, he was trying to get me to a place where I would abandon my conviction. He would get me to a place where I really, really liked him and I would just enter into a relationship with him and only God knows what would happen. Or maybe even a place where we would just find ourselves in a situationship where I would be so emotionally invested or so emotionally entangled that I don't even know what I would do at this point. So for me, it was also that there was a need to cut off communication because, like I said, I liked him. And I knew that he liked me, but obviously not enough to commit. And I didn't want a situation where I would find myself in a situationship that was going nowhere fast. So even when he tried to like stay in touch, I just closed the door to all that because I'm like, no, like there's no point. There is no purpose to this thing. Like the purpose isn't even just platonic friendship. So nah. Anyways, fast forward again to 2013. And I met a guy in fellowship. He wasn't in my fellowship, but he was one of the leaders of the fellowship in the area that I attended fellowship. And for the purpose of this video, we're going to call him Mr. I do not respect your boundaries. He was a nice guy. He was cute, tall, dark, handsome. And our conversations weren't awkward. The conversations didn't flow as seamlessly as with the other guys that I had mentioned, but the conversations weren't awkward. We could hold a conversation for a reasonable amount of time. And at this point in time, I attended Daystar Christian Center. I was going through a series of classes. For those of you that know the church, there's like a membership, discipleship, maturity classes, that sort of thing. I think I was taking the last class. So as part of the class, I think there was like an outreach project that we needed to do. And as part of the preparations for the project, there was a prayer team and I was the leader of the prayer team. So even at the end of the class, and I say class, it wasn't sort of like just one class. It was more like a course because it happened over a series of weeks. On the last day, when they were giving certificates out, I apparently won an award. I was like top 2 in the class, and he was there in the class. He was one of the leaders. Only for not long after that, guy now reaches out to me and is like, he thinks that he believes God says that I'm his wife. So I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to doubt that God said that to you, but it's a bit fishy that you're telling me this after you've discovered certain things about me, after you discover that I was a leader of the prayer team for the course. You found out that I was like top 2 in the whole class. There were like maybe like 100 people. I was top 2. It just seemed like I fit the image of the type of wife that he wanted, and he held on to that and then somehow believed that God was speaking to him. But I was like, okay, no problem. You feel like God has told you something, I need to pray about it as well, and I need to get my own conviction about the whole thing. Before I go on, I just wanted to highlight that I feel like with him and with Mr. Time Waster, they weren't sort of like attracted to me. They were attracted to the anointing on my life, because if you remember, Mr. Time Waster said he saw some light. I believe that that was sort of like the work of God, the hand of God, the Holy Spirit working in me that he saw and he was attracted to. Even this one, he was attracted to all the things that, God was using me to do. And the anointing is very attractive. Sometimes God didn't say. What it is that we are attracted to the anointing on that person's life. Anyways, by this time on my journey, I had erected a few more boundaries, one of which was I didn't have conversations with the opposite sex after 8 p.m. at night. Now, this was a boundary that a lot of people found ridiculous. They found a bit extreme, but it worked for me, because at the end of the day, my boundaries are to protect me, not to protect you. And I was very aware that the later conversations went into the nights, the more things that you shouldn't be talking about that you start talking about. That's when you start asking, what are you wearing? What did you wear today? What are you wearing to bed? And all these questions. So I just wanted that by 7:59, no matter who I'm talking to, okay, it's getting time for bed. Like I said, boundaries are meant to protect you, and you can tell a lot about a person by how they respond to your boundaries. Only a thief is upset when the door is locked. Let me say that again. Only a thief is upset when the door is locked. Anyways, this particular guy seemed hell-bent on violating this particular boundary. He claimed that he was convinced that I was going to be his wife, so the boundary should not apply to him. But I'm like, okay, you have your conviction. I don't have my conviction. We haven't entered into any agreement. So until then, the boundary actually should and does apply to you. So for him, he saw his violation of this boundary as him simply wanting to spend time with me. But I saw it as a lack of respect for what was important to me. The fact that he consistently wasn't willing to play something that was important to me above his immediate gratification was a red flag for me. If a man cannot see past his own desires to show consideration for your wishes, to show consideration for what's important to you in the early stage where he's most likely putting his best foot forward, imagine how he'll treat the more difficult boundaries later on in future. Is he going to be somebody who is going to be able to support you when things get difficult or when things get a little bit uncomfortable, or is he going to be more concerned about his own immediate gratification? It's also important to realize that having and maintaining your boundaries is a very important way to build trust. The idea here is, are you a man or woman of your word? A common mistake that I see a lot of people make when it comes to boundaries is that you feel like breaking your boundaries or violating your boundaries communicates to this person that you like them. But what you don't realize is that it actually communicates to them that you can't be trusted around people that you like, because you will break or violate your boundaries for them as well. Do you remember the movie Two Can Play That Game, when Vivica A. Fox and Maurice Chestnut were having relationship issues and she went on a date with someone else and he was really concerned? He believed that she was going to sleep with that person. And then when his friend asked him why, he's like, oh, it's because she slept with him on their first date. So he's like, she has shown a pattern of doing this. So he believed that she was going to do it with this person that she had gone on a date with as well. Boundaries are only effective when kept. But I find that a lot of people throw their boundaries out the window when they really like somebody. Unfortunately, doing that doesn't communicate to them what you want or communicate to them what you think it does. Most guys won't break up with a lady because they slept with her, but because she ended up not being the person that they thought she was. I'll explain. So he meets you and you communicate to him that you're a good Christian girl, you've been abstinent for however long, and suddenly because you like him, your abstinence becomes a thing of the past. Because to you, you feel like it communicates to him how much you like him, so you are willing to violate that boundary to show him how much you like him. But that's even going too far. Let's say you tell him no kissing before marriage, for example, and then the next thing you are locking lips. A one-off may not seem so bad, like people make mistakes and all of that, but when it becomes a pattern of you violating your boundaries, of you violating what you have said, it becomes an issue. And for a lot of people, it could very well be a deal breaker because it erodes the trust that this person has of you. You've told them one thing, but you're consistently doing something else because you like them. So they begin to ask themselves that, okay, if you meet somebody else that you like while you're dating them, you're also likely to violate your boundaries because you like this person. So when he breaks off the relationship, you go on with the narrative that all men are scum, that he just wanted to sleep with you. And while this is true for some people, it may not necessarily be true for this particular person, because he could very well have ended the relationship because he couldn't trust you. You said you were someone but showed him that you were someone else. Now, if for whatever reason you find yourself in a relationship with boundaries that you want to change, I would suggest that the first step is to ask yourself why you want to update this boundary. If it's because you like this person, what's the point of the boundary? That means you're only erecting boundaries and keeping boundaries for people that you don't like. Meanwhile, the boundaries should actually be for the people that you do like, because you are in a greater danger in those sorts of like situations, if you get what I mean. This is by no means an exhaustive list of red flags, so feel free to share in the comments any red flags that you have encountered on your own journey, and I'll see you in the next one.